Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our event today. Today, we're going to do the webinar, which we will devote to how to punish your opponent if he wants to play for a win, but his position doesn't contain any advantage. So we're going to talk about unreasonable play for a win and how to defeat your opponent in such situations. I would like to demonstrate the game that I played myself in October 2023. It was a national league here in Argentina. Okay, so we are waiting for more people to join. By the way, guys, if you have any news, you can share. Well, what do you think about the candidate tournament? So it seems that Nepal is leading. What's your opinion regarding it? Also, if you want to, well, the webinars are free, but if you want to support me, you can donate using this link. It's here in the chat. Yeah, let me show how it works. So let's say screen 2. So you click this link. So you click this link. This is a special application that allows to donate using PayPal. So you click donate. Then you can enter anything you want, your email address, then you click donate. So for example, let's say up to you, any amount, then you click PayPal, then you enter your PayPal account, and this is how it works. So yes, well, here, because I live in Argentina, it shows everything in Spanish language. Okay, so then you click here, and this is how you may support me if you want, if you are enjoying these webinars. Okay, fine. Let me let me close it. So this is this is the button to donate. Well, let's start. We are also streaming this event on TheChessWorld.com YouTube channel, as well as at our Chesslands website. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. If you have any like ideas, any thoughts regarding the candidate tournaments, also you're welcome. Okay. So my game that I played with white pieces. It was Italian game, and actually, mm, yeah. So it was Italian game, which I don't like because uh, I prefer to play more open positions, some open Sicilian variations where the positions are sharp and everyone can make a mistake. But that was Italian. And I played d3 just to protect the pawn on e4. So d6, a4, and my plan is to play c3, rook e1, h3, and then knight d2, knight f1, knight g3, something like that. Well, this is actually what I played in the game. A6, c3, bishop goes to a7, which surprised me because I was expecting black to castle. Then I played rook e1, h6, so he stops me from playing this move. And h3 this time is a mistake. Do you know why h3 is a mistake here? By the way, guys, is everything working? Is my sound working well? The video? Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so yeah, h3 is a mistake because it allows our opponent to initiate a strong attack with g5 because h3 works like a hook. So they play g4 and then we have to exchange one of the pawns, and this is how we open the file for the enemy rook to attack our king directly. So h3 is a mistake. Of course, I knew about that. I played knight bd2, but he played this move anyway. So knight goes to f1, g4, and I'm a bit passive with this move, so my position is passive. However, they lag in development, black lags in development, as well as there is no coordination among their pieces. So this bishop is good, the knight can be improved, and the queen potentially joins the attack, but these pieces and even the rook on e8 are not helpful at all. Well, here my opponent played knight h5. Well, typically grandmasters play h5 in this position. He played knight h5 because he wanted to move the knight to f4 quickly, which he actually did. I played knight a3, he played knight a4, and then I moved my other knight to f1. So queen f6. Well, let's talk about this position. What can we say? It seems that black already achieved something. They brought their knight on f4, so the knight attacks several squares into my territory, and knight h3 can be dangerous. Let's say if in this position I, for example, I don't know, capture the pawn, then they just continue with this move, maybe, yeah, with this move. And if I take, it's knight h3. Or maybe not knight h3, but knight d3. I actually don't know which move is better. Maybe this. Oh, wait a sec. Another option. Yeah, okay. So I think it's bishop g4. Queen take. Oops, sorry. Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. Let's go back. Okay, so in this position, if it's knight to g4, it's bishop g4, queen to g4, and knight d3 in this position, threatening here and here. And when the queen takes on f2, it's actually a checkmate on g1 after that. So what's your opinion? Knight g4 is not playable. What would you suggest? And what do you think about the position in generally? Who is better and why? Looks like black pieces are more active. They have two pieces into my territory. My knight is on f1. My other pieces are not so good as the enemy ones. But can you evaluate the position and tell me who is better and why? So here, Paul suggests knight g3 and then knight f5, which is quite clever. Yeah, it's definitely possible. Later, I rejected this variation, but yes, it was definitely possible. Okay, so I'm listening to your suggestion. B4, B5 is quite clever, but um, I would like to listen to what you think about the position in general. Oops, my mouse stopped working. Okay, now everything works. So what can you say about the position? White looks better. White looks better because of what? Don't you think that the black pieces activity is quite dangerous, and instead of playing on the queen side, some active actions, some defensive actions should be taken on the king side? Don't you think so? Uh-huh. So Paul thinks white is better because due to the pieces coordination. Well, okay. Any other suggestions, guys? By the way, you can unmute yourself and say something, like what you think. Well, of course, it's it's too time consuming to say, okay, white is better because of this or that. It's better to pronounce it. So if you want to share your thoughts, you're welcome. Okay. So yeah, looks like not many people want to share something. Okay, so white is better. I'm not sure. I actually think it's equal. I would say white has a very solid position, and even this activity maybe not enough to let black play for a win. So white pieces are more better coordinated. This is what Paul suggested. That's true. The white pieces are better coordinated. They are all, I mean, they all participate in the place of action, but some of black pieces do not. And doing before is definitely playable, as well as it was playable to play knight f5, which I originally wanted to play. Then bishop f5, bishop takes f4. Well, for example, if they, well, I could do this and then play d4. This is also came to my mind. This is where I'm a pawn down, but it seems that my position is still fine. But I wanted to do this, and then if he goes back, it's bishop e3. So he takes there, but then my knight goes to d5, and actually here, while ruining these pawns doesn't really affect the position much. G4 is also a weakness. So I thought that maybe I miscalculate something, maybe something like bishop f2 in this position. So bishop f2, king takes f2, and maybe then he moves and creates something like that. So I wanted to avoid complications, and I knew that before is typically a good move here. There is no danger on f2 at the moment. That's why I played it. However, he increased the pressure with h5. This is what I completely, well, this is, that was the main move I expected, actually. I play rook a2. Who knows what was the purpose of rook a2? There were two reasons why I played such a move. Well, we could discuss this game, but I don't remember when. Maybe a few months ago. Well, this move was not only to protect f2, but to play b5. Well, let me explain. So playing b5 in this position, if let's say there is no knight here, but even if, yeah, if there is no knight here, because I actually want to bring the knight to f5, may hang my rook after bishop f2, if the knight is not on e3. So with rook a2, I protect my rook. And if bishop f2 is coming, I can also take on f2 with the rook. So, well, and this is where my opponent overestimated the position. Instead of doing his aggressive actions, which he did, he played rook g8 here. And with this move, he still lags in development. He cannot castle to the king side anymore, which I think he didn't want actually, but I think he just overestimated. So this is where my opponent wanted to play for a win, regardless of what happens on the board. And that's why he took a lot of risk, and because of that, he was punished. So yes, there was a chance for him to succeed with the attack if I made a mistake, but at the same time, after rook g8, you can realize that the black's position also has some disadvantages. And when we are trying to punish our opponent for an unreasonable attack, we should identify which weaknesses the enemy position has and how to exploit these weaknesses. For example, here it's quite obvious that black lags in development. This is one thing. Well, the second thing to notice is that the king is still in the center. Well, maybe it's a lag of development too, but I can use it in a different way. So the enemy king in the center can be weak once the center is open. There also can be some activity through the E file. Maybe I take advantage of the pin, maybe I get rid of the pawn on e4 and then continue with d4, undermining the pawn on e4. e5, I mean. So lag of development and the enemy king being in the center. These are two things that we should take into account when we decide to punish our opponent. So what would you suggest after instead of rook g8? Well, the position is still very close to equality, and instead of doing his aggressive strategy with rook g8, black could play better. Okay, who wants to suggest a plan for black here? If you have anything else to share, you're welcome. Maybe we could take a look at this game where when we were talking about Italian games. So bishop e6 and castling queen side. Well, quite playable. So bishop e6, then for example, knight d5. So f2 is protected this time, so I don't worry about it. Take, knight e7, and then I play d4. But it seems that the position is more favorable for me. So how do they continue? They cannot take on d5, so maybe they play this move, supporting it. Then I play knight g3 and try to get the control over e4 square. I have a bishop pair, so yes, this is definitely possible. Instead of this plan, bishop e6 and castle queenside, I think that knight e7 was also fine. In such a case, the game could continue with b5, castle, knight g3, a takes b5, a takes b5, maybe bishop d7. Then I bring my, well, I can choose what to play, but maybe I can just sacrifice the pawn there. But after d4, I eliminate the enemy bishop. And with the bishops of opposite color, it can be a draw in case if we just exchange major pieces. Or I can try to play for a win if I initiate the attack on the enemy king. So if you can imagine such a situation where I do this and threaten h7, I would potentially have some winning chances. The other option here is to play this move and try to focus on the attack of the f7. I may experience some issues with my king's pawn cover, but looks like there is only one queen into the attack. So if he plays this move, I just can continue with this move. Well, actually, wait a sec. I can just continue with something else, like, well, this is the threat, so I can totally ignore. I can play queen e1. But let's say instead of queen e1, what if I just simply take on f3, they take, and I just play king h1, and then I try to not only protect g2, but gain the pawn on f3 because it is located on the light square. So yeah, d4 d4 would definitely provide me with a compensation for a pawn. Moreover, you probably know, guys, that when the pawns are doubled, it's quite complicated to convert the pawn majority into a passed pawn. So even if I pass the game to the endgame, 4 versus 3 on the king side cannot be converted to a passed pawn. Okay. So that what my opponent should play, knight e7 or bishop e6. Well, bishop e6, knight d5, then h4 was suggested by Sujan. Okay, so let's say instead, oh wait, the queen is hanging, so probably take, knight e7. Then I play d4 and h4 in this position. No, it's too optimistic. I can just do what? Let's say I take on a5 first. Oh, actually, I don't really need to rush. I wanted to take this, but then rook g8 and I have g2 hanging. So I can just move the king maybe. Or what else? Maybe just b5. Because if he does g3, then bishop e3 cements the position. No, it was definitely better not to continue this attack, but to play positionally here for black. But they played rook g8 and they overestimated the position. And now it's time for me to take advantage of the enemy weaknesses, which I mentioned. The king in the center and lag of development. So knight d5, trying to open the position. Knight takes, pawn takes. Okay, yeah, h4 earlier. Okay, just let's go back. So you mean h4 right now? I think h4 here is a blunder. Because now, with the rook protecting f2, I can simply take on g4. Or you mean bishop e6? I play knight d5? Well, no, okay. Well, I don't know where earlier. But if earlier h4 with the rook on a2, knight g4 can be played. So rook g8, knight d5, the knights are exchanged. I open the file. And this is where my opponent surprised me. I was expecting the knight retreat, after which I would continue with d4, and my position is good. I can double here and add pressure uh, to the center. I can expose the enemy king's position, which is even weaker than my king is. But he played g3, which is definitely a mistake, but it could provide him with some practical chances. And if I knew only which complications it would lead to, I would continue with h takes g3 because this is much safer. So the game would continue with this, but then I just need to move the queen. So instead, I played knight g3. Bishop comes to g4. I play queen d2, and then instead he should play knight e7. I would play d4. He would have some chances to continue the attack. However, the attack no longer looks promising. But my opponent again decided to play for a win, whatever it costs. So he played h4. I completely missed that I can play d takes c6. Well, we did talk about it uh, at our class devoted to Italian game. So let me just take z4. Okay, yeah, well, I played knight e4 in this position, but d takes c6 is a possible move too. Let's go back and let's talk about bishop e3 instead of knight g3. So pawn to g3, and what about this move? Well, this didn't come to my mind because I was sure that I have to take. Well, probably he takes, then I take, let's say, and then what? Bishop takes, rook takes, and then he does knight e7. Well, what do you think, guys, about this position? I think he has some chances to succeed with the attack, maybe queen g5 or queen g6. Oh, g6 is a good spot for the knight. So, and if he manages to hide his king with castling queenside, maybe he would obtain some practical chances. So bishop e3 doesn't look good, but it was possible to continue in this position with d takes c6. I just didn't realize that I can sacrifice the queen, because then I have f7 and f6 attack. So now I'm about to promote, and if he moves the rook, I take the bishop. If he takes my queen, then his queen is hanging as well as his rook. So if he sacrifices, then I'm just down the exchange, but it's a completely winning position. I have 2 pawns to compensate it. I mean, I have more than 2 pawns. I have 3 pawns to compensate it. Also, if he, let's say, does this move, then I have enough compensation for the queen. It's 2 rooks and 2 pawns. So should be winning. The move I played was good too. I played knight e4, queen f5, and here, if you remember, guys, maybe those of you who didn't watch the webinar devoted to Italian game can tell me which is the best move here. I didn't find it during the game, but the move is so well. The move isn't obvious, but once you see, once you find it, you will say, "Oh, why didn't you play such a move? It was so obvious. You could just defeat him in this exact position." Instead, I played another move which led to complications, but my position was still much, much better. So queen h6, this is exactly what I played in the game. There was a better move instead. Queen h6 allows me to play knight f6 after that. That was the plan. d4. Well, no, I don't think d4 works. So what if they play bishop f3? Because it's a knight attack. No, d4 it looks suspicious. D takes c6. No, there was something wrong with d takes c6. I think it's bishop f3 again. Yeah, so just pawn takes knight, bishop f3. So then I think I can still do this move and try to play knight g5 to gain the material back, but it still looks a bit suspicious. So bishop f7, king f7, then knight g5, check, rook g5, queen g5, queen g5. No, this is a blunder. But if he keeps the queens on the board, then the position becomes quite risky. Maybe queen h6 now, but they still can play rook g8. I mean, take, rook g8, and g2 is under attack. If I play g3, they take, and then they take with the rook for the second time. So it's risky. Who can guess the move? King h1? No, well, I don't see the point of king h1 at all. Well, if I play king h1, well, I think they could just move the knight or castle. Castle queenside, I mean. Okay, so let me just show you. The move I'm talking about is queen e4. Look at how nice this move is. Pawn takes, knight d6. Double check. The king escapes, knight takes there, and they take with the bishop, but they do not gain a piece because I take on c6, and then I'm completely winning with so many pawns. Oh, I definitely take the one on f4. If queen takes f4, it's actually the same. Maybe first I take the rook, and then I take on c6. Yeah, okay. So I played queen h6. I didn't notice queen f4. Bishop f3, and knight takes f6. So that was my original idea. So queen sacrifice doesn't make sense because rook g2 doesn't lead to a checkmate. So king e7, knight takes g8, rook takes g8, queen h4 check. king moves, and then g3. So the key idea is that I can play g3 because there is no pawn on h4, and queen h3 cannot be played. So knight e7, d4, opening the position, and he played this move, which was also a bit of inaccuracy. I offered an exchange, which he rejected, of course, but after bishop f1, because the idea of d4 was not only to open the position, but to let the bishop go back in order to defend the g2. Queen goes there, d takes e5, and after white successfully finished with their defense, it's time to initiate active actions. And by opening the position in the center, I fully take advantage of the enemy weaknesses, such as lack of a coordination among their pieces and the enemy king being in the center. So that was the reason why I opened the position. D takes e5, rook takes e5. So I sacrificed the exchange. It wasn't the best move, but it was probably one of the simplest way. And let's now take advantage of the king weakness. Bishop f4. He played this move, and this is where I was low on time and played h4. And of course, I was expecting him to take. Well, he played this move, and the game was over after bishop h3. It's a checkmate. Well, what if queen h4? Who can tell what would happen? Because it's pinned. The g pawn is pinned, and he's about to deliver a checkmate. What did I prepare for queen takes h4? So queen f5, king e8, then queen h3. Well, Paul, I think you blunder the bishop on f4. I think they can take the bishop. You can play queen c8 after that. Okay, so queen f5, king d8. And if you play queen h3, they take on f4. So bishop g2, I think. Okay, so let me show you. Queen f5 or bishop g2 right away. Bishop g2, then what could happen? Well, this move is actually fine too, but I think they just retreat back to threaten this. Well, I think it's still fine. Even if we are down the exchange in this position, we are still winning. But what I prepare was queen f5. King moves, doesn't matter where, let's say to e8. Bishop h3, this is what I wanted to play. Now I'm threatening with this, then I take the rook, and then I take the queen. So if rook g3, which looks good by the first glance, then just king f1 and there are no more checks. f2 is protected, g2 is protected, and the queen is hanging, and the enemy king is in a danger too. So I would be winning anyway. He played rook e8 and lost the game after that quickly. So what you may remember from this is that once you see that your opponent plays for a win, but you believe that the position isn't so good for him, so he doesn't have advantage, or your king's position is solid and he initiates the attack, and you think that he doesn't do a proper plan, you should be looking for a way of how to punish him. And this punishment should be based on the weaknesses of his position. So you should evaluate the position and define. So you should detect which problems your opponent has and try to take advantage of that. So here, like I did, I punished him for leaving the king in the center, as well as lack of his pieces coordination. Okay, so yeah, before we continue, I have a few things to share. First of all, so the webinars are free, but those of you who wants to support me, you can donate using PayPal by clicking on this link. So for example, donate, then a new window appears. Let me show you, maybe you don't see, yeah, you do see it. So then you enter email and then you click donate or enter your PayPal account. But the second thing that I wanted to show you is actually this. Let me share this. Well, I'm not sure if you see the screen. Okay, let me close it and just paste. So tomorrow on Monday, I'm going to participate in this event. In the morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time, I'm going to stream how I play London on chess.com. So if you are interested, you can also join this event. Well, I'll be streaming on chess.com Twitch. So okay, I'll copy this link to the chat so you can read everything. Yeah, so this is the link. Yeah, you can register here if you want. So they invited me based on my because my course on Chessable devoted to London system was quite popular. Okay. Okay, so it's not promoted here, but anyway, fine. So let's continue. Let's continue with our original topic. Well, sometimes your opponent initiates the attack, but sometimes he plays positionally. Let's say the position is equal, or maybe he is slightly worse, but he is trying to win the game at any cost. And how to punish your opponent in that case. This is what we are going to talk about in the game. This is what I'm going to demonstrate in the game between Laios Portish and Tigran Petrosyan. Okay, so Clifford, if you don't mind, I'll mute your microphone. You can later unmute if you want. Okay. So d4, knight f6. Well, the opening is not important. It was Nimza Indian. Then there was a fianchetto on the queen side, castle, castle, and d5. Well, if c takes d5, it's definitely e takes d5, but not a knight move, which seems to be logical because it doesn't close the bishop. If so, then queen c2, gaining a temper, and then e4, because e4 in this exact position is not possible. There is a pawn hanging after knight takes c3, but after queen c2, which does two things, protect on c3 and attacks on h7, e4 provides white with an advantage. So that's why not taken with the knight, but taken with the pawn. This variation is possible, then the game could continue like that, for example. In the game, it was a3. So bishop d6, b4. They are about to play c5. So which plan would you choose for black if you're expecting white to play c5? Okay, so John suggests d takes c4 in order to liberate the light squared bishop of black. Well, yes, it's a very common plan. Well, this is actually what was played in the game. But what then? So in this position, it's possible to play a5 to try to undermine and make a3 weakness. So, for example, pawn takes, rook takes. Okay, c5. Well, c5 in this position, I doubt. I would say e5, but in order to play e5, you need your knight on d7. So I am quite familiar with this type of the position. Usually, when the bishop is on c8, e5 is even more effective because it can go to g4, and the bishop can go to f5 if needed. But even this time, even if you achieve the pawn on e4 and the bishop supporting this pawn, it's still quite helpful for black. So bishop b2, then a5 was played, b5, and then finally e5. Well, taking on e5 doesn't make any sense. There is no way to initiate a discovered attack. That's why here white continued with rook e1. e4, knight d2, and queen e7. Then bishop e2. Well, so this pawn on e4 is quite annoying for white. And what do you think white should typically do with this pawn? What's your opinion? So yeah, Paul is absolutely correct. So they should try to play f3. Because when you undermine such a pawn, then you can get your e-pawn further, and you already have the rook here, so you definitely may obtain some advantage here. But you cannot play f3 right away. If you do so, then pawn takes. So the knight has to take. Well, taking with the pawn is too risky. So the knight has to take, but then the black knight goes to e4. And after this move, you just capture. If they play this move, taken doesn't make sense because this is how you weaken all light squares. Just queen e8. And maybe later you consider f5. Maybe this knight goes to f6. So something like that. That's why bishop e2 was played, because the idea of this move is to play f3, pawn takes f3, bishop takes f3, and after bishop takes bishop, it's not the knight, but the queen goes to f3. So, okay, let me just illustrate it. Let's say I play maybe this move, take, bishop takes, the bishop should be exchanged, queen takes, and then they are about to play e4. So we cannot stop this move. Even if we play knight e4, it won't work. It's just a blunder. Rook a d8 was played in the game. So, and this is where they could play f3, but decided to start with queen c2 first, rook f8, and then f3. Well, maybe this move was slightly better, but f3 is actually still okay. Pawn takes, bishop takes, bishop, and knight takes. So they don't actually fully control the e4 square, which allows us to play with the knight. But that was the white's plan. So just again, let's take a look at this position. So why did they play queen c2? So we continued with this move. So doing f3 in this position is still possible. Then, for example, the game could continue with this, take. And after this move, there is some attack which may compensate the black piece's activity. For example, g3, queen g5. Oh, wait, let me show you. If, let's say, you play e4 in this position, I think they can play knight e5, having in mind the idea of this check. And this is how black pieces can initiate the attack on the white king. Well, that's why maybe f3 is too early. But the idea of queen c2 was to undermine, exchange everything on e4, and chase the if there is a black piece like the black rook, for example, then chase it away. Yeah, Peter, thank you for donation. I appreciate your help. Okay, so what? Queen c2, rook e8, and then it was f3. And after all these exchanges, white thought that they can continue with knight d2 and advance the pawns. So the position was approximately equal, and instead white should be playing something like knight c4, then exchanging on d6, then later in the game trying to undermine with f3. Maybe try to activate this bishop by doing a4, bishop a3. So something like that. Instead, they overestimated their position and thought that with two pawns in the center, they will be playing for a win after this move. But a lot of pieces were exchanged, and black got more space with their pieces. And that's why here e4 is a mistake. Who can tell me what's wrong with this move? Because, well, if white wants to play for a win, then his winning plan is definitely connected with advancing these pawns. So this, and then trying to convert them to a passed pawn, as well as attacking the weaknesses of the black's position, like this, like c7. So what do you think? What's wrong with this plan? How should we continue here? So 95 suggested by John. Okay, what other ideas you have in mind? Yeah, 95 seems to be quite clever. Especially if white advances the pawn to e5, then knight e5 works perfectly well. Guys, do you have any other suggestions? Yeah, okay, f6. Well, f6 is quite clever, actually, because you control the e5 square, too. I think such a move would allow them to play knight c4, and maybe later prepare e5. So that's why, in my opinion, knight e5 is better. Well, this move seems to be quite interesting because we attack, and e5 cannot be played with a tempo, but then knight c4, and then d5 is coming. Knight e5. So the idea is that pawn takes, bishop c5 with a check, king goes to f1. Well, actually, maybe to h1 this time. And then rook d2. So we exchange the knights. Well, this move doesn't make sense. We just take the bishop because rook d8 is not a mate. So bishop c3 should be played. I think our rook is exchanged after that. So let's say rook d3. Yeah, rook d3 is a nice move because if this rook goes to c1, a3 is vulnerable. Okay, maybe bishop goes here. Then this rook goes, let's say, still to d3. Bishop f4. Well, knight e5 is quite promising if they take. But what if they do not take? What if, for example, in this position, well, the knight is going to invade the white's camp. So that's why, what about this move? Well, knight g4. Well, because I'm threatening to take. If you then continue with this move, I can simply play knight f1 and get two pieces for a rook. I'll show you. So let's say just a lift, then this, then knight f1. And, well, you cannot increase the pressure because I just play king f... No, I just play rook e1. So if you increase the pressure, I play rook e1. And on the next move, I play king f2. Or just king h1 to unpin. So maybe knight g4, like John suggested. Let's say the rook goes to b3. And e5 is not coming at the moment, but h3, then e5. Okay, yeah, it's just bishop h2. Actually, yeah, so looks like knight g4, rook h3 is a must. Okay, maybe in this position I just play bishop c3. Okay, there was another suggestion. d4, you mean d5? Well, d5, then knight d3 looks interesting here. D takes e6, knight e1. Because after rook takes, I still have bishop c5, which threatens the knight, and I don't care about this pawn at all. No, I think bishop c3 is good enough here. And if the knight jumps there, just rook e d1, and e5 will be played anyway, because bishop c3 defends on d2 also. Okay, so knight e5 is a possible way, but instead, what about knight c5, the move that was played in the game, after which the position is favorable for black. So it works similar to knight e5, but this time black also gains a pawn. And knight d3 is still coming, as well as it is an attack of the pawn on e4, which is right now protected. So if, for example, Which move? Rook e3, let's say. Rook e3, like I suggested. Then knight goes to a4, and this pawn becomes vulnerable. Bishop f4 is coming too. If, let's say, bishop c3, then because the knight is here and not there, knight a4 still looks really good. And then the d4 pawn is a weakness. So let's say knight b1, then bishop this bishop jumps maybe here, maybe just to f8 to keep attacking a3, which is also a potential weakness. And then let's say d5, bishop c5, king goes to h1, just rook e7. And what we need is just to double, and then this pawn is lost completely. So knight c5, that's why they had to play knight c4. Maybe another move was rook e2, then still knight a4. So so when you have space, this pawn march becomes not so effective, because you have more room to maneuver your pieces and attack these pawns. Such a situation happens very often when your opponent plays with hanging pawns. And hanging pawns, you guys probably know that these are d4 and c4 for white, and d5, c5, not supported with the b pawn. So when your opponent advances the pawns together, try to attack them if you see that protecting each of them with the other pawn may create some weaknesses in the enemy position. So if they play this move, we can occupy this as well as we activate our pieces. Okay, so knight c5 was played, knight c4, but this time we can just simply capture there. Was there anything else? Well, d5, just go back, and then knight d3 and bishop e5, so e4 is still a weakness, because we provoked one of the pawns to move, and the other one became a weakness. If it's just this move, it's simply bishop takes e5. So rook takes e5, rook takes e5, and there is a knight hanging behind. That's why knight c4. Knight takes e4, and black is a pawn up. Rook ac1, trying to pressure c7, but just this move. a3 is also a weakness, and it's better to keep this bishop alive. Knight goes to e5. Knight goes to d6. If rook c7 this time, it's just knight b5, after which these two pawns are under attack, and black faces with more material losses. a4, supporting b5, f6. The knight moves, which leads to an exchange of the rooks. And then after rook d7, it's just one extra pawn, and what black needs is only to realize this extra pawn, which they successfully did. So knight, well, the rest for us is not important. So what you may learn from this game is that if your opponent wants to play for a win, you should be identifying weaknesses in his position, his disadvantages. In this case, his main disadvantage was a very unpleasant position of his pieces that couldn't fully support these hanging pawns. So, for example, after knight c5, there was a very interesting discovered attack. You could, and in case of d5, we could activate our pieces and enter the enemy camp with our pieces too. Well, okay, let's quickly go to the very end. So the rooks are exchanged, rook d7, knight f5. This is a weakness. Prophylaxis to secure the position of the knight on f5. And then the king goes closer. The king goes to f5, g4, and this move. What do you think is the reason of this move? So how would you play? H4, exactly. So Paul and John are correct. It's H4, undermining, entering the enemy camp. So H4, King G2. So they want to take with the knight. But, well, we can just, we can actually take, and if he takes with the knight, I think it's fine to exchange the knight for the bishop and play rook h3 or king e4. So, for example, bishop takes, king takes, then you do this. He goes to g2 back, and, well, knight here, or what else you can suggest? Yeah, maybe just knight f4, maybe. Knight f4, king goes to g1, and then you just enter the enemy camp. Okay, fine. So king e4 was played immediately, and knight a3 here, there was an exchange, and then just h3. And this is where white resigned. So why did they resign? They resigned because they don't have any counterplay, and they are likely to lose another pawn. So because rook h5, and you play bishop b4, chase him away, then you attack the pawn on d5. With rook d5, you attack the pawn on d4, successfully take it, and there is nothing to talk about. This black king in the center cannot be attacked. It's not the object of the attack. So it's completely fine. Okay, so we are done with this. I just want you to point your attention to the moment when first I illustrated you the game where my opponent started an unreasonable attack. He did have some space on the king side, so the attack was possible, but at the same time he had difficulties with coordination of his pieces, and that's the reason why later he faced with such serious problems like the weakness of the king. So in this exact example, in this game between Portish and Petrosyan, White wanted to play for a win because they had two pawns in the center. But again, they didn't fully estimated what their disadvantages are, and that they are not prepared for this pawn march. Instead of doing all this queen c2 stuff or advancing the pawn to e4. So you see, actually, even the engine says here that e4 was a mistake. So e4 is inaccuracy according to the engine. According to the engine, this was the best move. And then after f5, the pawns are stopped, and then the positional play starts. So something like that would happen. Maybe, well, this move doesn't seem like a good idea because of knight d5. Well, maybe d5 first, knight takes, and bishop d4, and then rook c6. So the bishop should be activated. So that would be a positional play for both players. But White overestimated the position, started with a pawn march, and didn't realize that the white pieces are not prepared for this pawn activity, as well as the pawns themselves can be weaknesses. Okay, fine. So we continue with the last example, and this last example is the game played by Bobby Fischer. However, well, Bobby Fischer, this is the guy. Here on the background. I also have Gary Kasparov. Yesterday it was his birthday. And well, usually when we demonstrate Fischer's games, it's something where Fischer initiated a very nice attack and defeated his opponent, and yeah, he was doing the only moves and finally ended with a brilliant combination. This game is quite opposite. This is where Bobby Fischer didn't play well, and because he considered himself as a better player comparing to Ludwig Pac-Man. Oh, so he was playing for a win, and he wanted this win at any cost. Pac-Man made a lot of mistakes too, but the way Bobby played for a win was definitely unreasonable, and that's what he was punished for. Okay, let's continue. Okay, I also have some notes regarding it. Yeah, so I have my notes here. So it was Queen's Gambit. Yeah, they started like a ratio opening with knight f3, but then it's just transposed to Queen's Gambit. Sorry, e3. Well, very passive move. This is how my old coach would play, but I hate playing like that. So I think that the pieces should be activated. I want to play for a win, so I would here continue with either bishop g5 or knight c3. But anyway, e3, but Bobby played knight c6, the move that I hate myself. I do play knight c6 against d4, d5 positions, but only with a concrete idea. When I have my bishop on f5 and the enemy bishop is on g2, this is how I prevent the g2 bishop activity. Well, if you want, later I can demonstrate it. So knight c6, the move is considered to be a huge strategic mistake. Who can tell why? I'm sure Brian can, because I was explaining it to Brian several times, I think. I also think that Johnny knows, but Johnny left our meeting. Yeah, okay. Actually, a lot of people know. It blocks the c pawn, c5 pawn. So, which means that this pawn cannot neither support the center nor undermine the center. So that's why knight c6 is a strategic mistake. But I admit that such a move can be played sometimes in order to initiate some concrete ideas, like knight before knight c2 fork with the bishop on f5, which I typically play, or when this knight maybe does knight a5 attack, or maybe when you plan to transfer the knight, or maybe you play e5 early and you don't need the c pawn. Instead, you activate your bishop after that. So something like that. Well, it's definitely not related to d takes c4. I don't see the point of doing it. Anyway, so knight c3, bishop b4, bishop d2. Castle, a3 was played, and Bobby decided to take, which does make sense. Then his knight jumps to the center. Queen c2, a5 was played in the game. Well, I sometimes play this type of the position too, but then I continue with this move. And my knight is on d7 and the pawn is on c6. So I exchange the dark square bishop in order to get a stone wall position, which would allow me to initiate the attack on the king side. The problem is this bishop, which then I try to activate by doing b6, bishop b7, and c5. So this is a very playable way of fighting against those who prefer to play early e3 and leaving the bishop on c1 in Queen's Gambit. But in this position with the knight on c6, f5 doesn't seem like a good strategy. So a5 to stop b4. Now b4 doesn't work, right? Rook takes. Actually, maybe this move first. If the bishop is distracted, it's rook takes a1. So it's just a pawn loss. So that's why b3, b6. b6 weakens the knight as well as c7 pawn potentially. But bishop b2. So here Pacman played b3 in order to let the bishop escape. Bishop a6. And what's your opinion, guys, regarding c takes d5? Because c takes d5 hangs the knight as well as the c7 pawn. Would you play such a move? Or do you think black may save the position here? Okay, so hello to everyone who joined us recently. Today we are talking about how to fight when your opponents unreasonably decides to play for a win. So I understand when people decide to play for a win when their position has advantage, but if their position is worse or approximately equal, instead of playing for a win directly, it makes sense first playing positionally and improving the pieces coordination. Okay, Brian was looking at b4 at which point? Knight before or what? So, I mean, what black should react in case of c takes d5, because it hangs the knight. Ah, queen takes. Well, queen takes directly doesn't look so good because after bishop c4, bishop takes bishop, pawn takes, the queen has to move there. Well, it's actually still fine. Yeah, it's still fine. Or I can do this, and then rook c1. Then this and these are hanging both. So knight e7, and then I may take on c7. That's why I think a proper move order here is to take here first. This is not possible because bishop g2. That's why rook f1 and then queen d5. And after rook c1, this time it's knight e7. Well, because of several things. Because after queen takes e7, there is queen b3, which was also possible with the rook on a6, but this time there is also rook c8. So, for example, if this move, then you do this, and then you can play queen c2, winning the game. Okay, so c takes d5 doesn't look so good in this position. Bishop d3 and f5 was played. Rook c1, rook c8. It seems that with f5, Bobby Fischer wants to initiate strong attack. So white castles, and can you guess the move that Bobby Fischer played here? Well, I want you to guess two moves. The one that Bobby Fischer played and the one that you think should be played. So I am waiting for your suggestions. Okay, so Brian would play rook f6. But what do you think, Brian? Did Bobby play rook f6? Georgios suggests g5. Well, interesting, but even more aggressive than rook f6, and may lead to more troubles than this move. Any other suggestions? Okay. No other suggestions. So g5, I actually don't know how to play against g5. I think I would consider this move maybe. Or maybe just knight d2 or knight e1 to avoid any problems. But I like c takes d5. So c takes d5, bishop d3, queen takes d3, then queen d5, and okay. So I still cannot attack this. Knight on c6. Okay, g5. Maybe I just play knight e1 and then think about doing f3. What do you think? Because if you do g4, then well, with knight e1, I also protect on d3. Then c takes d5 works, because here I take with the knight, and then I can capture your knight on c6 for free. So knight e1 is quite clever. It threatens, well, if let's say this knight goes maybe bishop b7 to protect it, then I can play f3 and chase this knight away. C takes d5, then f5 is vulnerable, so the knight has to take. Well, and then that sooner or later I will push e4. I just don't want to blunder f4, so maybe queen d2 and then e4. And if I open the position, I can take advantage of the enemy king being exposed. So, by the way, guys, uh, I have a video on YouTube, as well as there was a webinar where we were talking about how to play when you are under attack. There are three ways to prevent problems when you're under the attack. One is to open the position in the center. This is the most common one. The other one is to exchange enemy attacking pieces, and the third one is to initiate a counterplay, either on the center or on the other side. But if you initiate this counterplay on the other side, it should be much faster than the kingside attack of your opponent. So here e4 would only prove that with g5, black exposed their position. Bobby Fischer played rook f6. Instead of that, he'd better play knight e7 here, and then would try to continue with c5. This is how he would play. He could maybe get approximately equal position soon. But rook f6 shows that he is absolutely wrong with evaluation of the position. So this is the exact example of unreasonable play for win. How do we decide that the kingside attack is no longer possible? We decided by looking at how enemy pieces are located. Well, the center is not stable is not true, because it's actually stable. There can be an exchange, but such an exchange doesn't change much, and the center is still closed. So that's why the center is stable. But most of black pieces are on the queen side, so they cannot support the kingside attack. And of course, black cannot checkmate with only fewer pieces into the attack. That's why here we identify that a kingside attack isn't a good idea. Okay, so rook d1, rook h6. They continue their plan. Bishop f1. Now, well, c takes d5 is not a threat because the rook will be protecting the knight. G5, c takes d5. And the second time, Bobby Fischer overestimated his position. What he could do in this position? Well, definitely take here, after which the king takes, e takes d5, then g4 is coming, so maybe knight e5, knight takes knight, d takes d5, and what's your opinion regarding rook h2? Well, when I play knight e5, didn't I blunder the pawn? Well, of course, I do not blunder a pawn, because my e5 pawn becomes dangerous now. So I play queen c6 and take on d5. Yeah, Brian, can you please clarify? Oh, okay. So bishop f1, then after knight e5, knight takes knight, and instead of rook takes h4 or h2, they should play g4. But then f3 works, and we are able to bring the queen to the defense. So take. Where does the knight go? Well, here, maybe. But then queen f5 just. And black doesn't have enough resources to succeed with an attack. And with queen f5, we are threatening to do something like that, which hangs both pieces here. Also, e6, I think, is quite dangerous because of the b2 bishop activity. The black king will be in trouble too. So rook g6 here, then take, queen g5, and there it's not a checkmate. So we just take, and if they continue with this, we can successfully escape. Well, probably they may repeat the position with these moves. No, if king c3, well, yeah, king c3, then the rook c6, take, and this is a repetition. Actually, you can play king e1 and make another repetition. Why not rook g2? Because after king d3, the black queen is hanging too. Okay, so this is what could happen, but black overestimated their position and played this move. Bishop a6, g takes f3. It seems to be equal. And here Bobby had in mind that after this move, he activates his queen. So first, why not to capture here? What do you think? What do you think? Which move black had in mind in this position? F takes g2? No, wait. F takes, you mean F takes g2? No, definitely not. There is a much better move. Of course, F takes g2 makes sense too, but it seems to me that something like f3 is enough to support the position. So it's queen h4, and we are threatening with a mate. The only way to save seems to be h3. And after h3, yes, you can play like that, as well as you can play queen g5 in this position, or rook g6, which I like most. And after g3, it's just a knight sacrifice. Well, queen h3, bishop f1, it still works, but is a bit slow. Knight g3 looks much, much better. Queen g3, if king goes there, queen g1 is a mate. So, and if the king goes there, then f2, and this is the next move, which is a checkmate. The only way to save the pawn is to move the bishop, but that blocks the rook, so queen g1 is a mate. So that's why the pawn on f3 should be taken first. Queen g5, king f1, rook h1. So looks like Bobby initiated a very strong attack, according to his mind, but looks like he has only fewer pieces. Can he succeed with these pieces? So this is the moment where Pachman started making mistakes. It was just enough to play this move, bishop c8, and well, rook f2 doesn't make any sense. Look at the material that white has here. It's two rooks and the bishop versus queen. And also, one of these two pieces can be captured. What about queen g2? Seems to be a better move, but then the king escapes. Queen f3. Well, bishop e6 first, and then queen takes h2. So again, it's a completely winning position for white. So looks dangerous, but at the same time, white could just capture the pawn on the rook on c8 and win the game because of extra material. Black just doesn't have enough resources to succeed with the attack. They may succeed, but only if white makes a serious mistake. However, white started making serious mistakes after that. Rook f8. Maybe it was a kind of a psychological player because Bobby was a better player. He was already a legend. And in this position, white played e5 to not open the f file. But just rook d2 in order to protect on f2 was still good. And again, if queen g2, king goes there, queen takes, we escape. This is not a problem. The king escapes to c3. e5 was played, f4, and another mistake, e4. So now that's true. Black is better. Black plays f3, king goes to e1, and this is where they could just positionally play e takes d5. Queen takes c6 maybe, and then queen g1 becomes more dangerous. Queen e2, then queen b2, so it can be another check, deliver it, and then the bishop is taken, or just f2 with the idea of f1 and queen d2 mate. In the game, instead, Bobby believed that he is winning, and what he needs to do is just this move. That was a critical mistake. So who can tell me what Fischer prepared for bishop f1 move? So, guys, I'm listening to your suggestions. Rook h1. Well, rook h1 may not work because queen d3. Okay, so Georgios is absolutely correct. Here it's queen f1, king takes f1, and then rook h1 mate. Well, of course, king may escape, but then the king is even in danger. So, for example, then just rook f2, then king here, and the queen can be captured with a check. If the king goes here, I think it's even worse because of rook a2. Then just f2 is enough. Okay, fine. So queen g1, the king escapes. Queen f2, the king escapes further. Queen g3, hoping on this pawn. Queen goes to d3. If f2, the queen is just hanging. So the pawn is pinned at the moment. E takes d5. Rook g1. Well, it's not a blunder. There is rook g2 move. But after that, well, again, the pawn cannot take. So the queen takes. It's just queen f1, and white has extra bishop. D takes e4. Well, what can be played in this position? If the queen moves away to avoid the queen exchange, it's this move. That's why, well, or if queen g4, it can be queen g1, which also lead to an exchange. That's why just d takes e4, the queens are exchanged, and rook g1, rook f2, simply bishop c4. And after the king moves, these pawns are just taken. So Bobby kept playing here. A few more moves were played, and only then he resigned. So white has everything protected, passed pawns, and extra bishop, which is enough to win this game. b4, a takes b4, a takes b4, and this is the moment where Bobby resigned. So what can I tell you? Well, guys, evaluation of the position is very important. And if you see that doing the attack on your king is quite unreasonable because of some factors that you consider, like, for example, too many black pieces crowded on the queen side, you can you first detect why you think this attack is unreasonable. You identify weaknesses into the enemy camp, the disadvantages, and then simply you try to exploit them. At the same time, have it in mind if the enemy attack doesn't become stronger. So here, rook f6 was definitely an unreasonable move. And g4 was definitely an overestimation of the position. What Pachman could do was just to continue with bishop c8 here. That was enough to punish black, because black didn't have enough resources into the attack. Okay, so I think we are done for today. Do you have any questions? Okay, so I have once again, I would like to remind you that if you want to support me, this is the link that you can use. You can click donate here and then enter the amount, just and proceed. So the payment will be sent to my own PayPal account. Let me copy this link to the chat. Maybe later I can find how to pin it. Also, let me remind you about opening roulette that I'm going to participate tomorrow morning. It starts on Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Well, will be playing games as well as streaming. So this is what we're gonna play, this type of the position. So the games will be played with a rapid time control. So because this is what I play myself, that's why this is what we are going to, and that's why I was invited to play it on chess.com. Okay, any questions, anything you want to share with me? Also, next week, there will be a masterclass by David Fitzsimons. He's back from his vacation. Okay, so I don't have the link at the moment, but I will. Well, yeah, I will send a notification by email to you guys regarding the masterclass of David Fitzsimons this weekend. So see you next to, well, yeah, I think I'll do some content next Sunday, same time. See you then. As well as I'll get you an email regarding the masterclass that David is going to conduct. So thank you for attending today, and thank for everyone, especially for those who supported me using the donation link. See you next week. Bye bye.